Good morning. My name is Marcy Stromgren. You've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have in the studio today Donna Bergstrom, who's running for a Senate seat in this area of Duluth. I'm going to have her tell you what the Senate seat is, what area that covers, and I just want to welcome you, Donna,
Yes.
coming in today
Hi,
and
Marcy.
talking to the voters.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. What a pleasure it is to be in the studio with you.
So, first of all, Donna, I'd like the viewers to know a synopsis of what background you have that you think will be beneficial for your seat. But let's tell the viewers, first of all, what Senate seat in what area you would represent if you were elected to that.
Sure. So it would be for State Senate District 7. And anytime somebody has a question about where their district boundaries are, they can absolutely go to the Secretary of State's website, or they can go to the Minnesota House or Senate. So that's a good resource for them to know and keep track of. For myself, though, I can tell you it is for all of Duluth minus precincts 11 and 23. So tip to tip. And from Canal Park all the way up to the mall. So it's really the entire city.
Wonderful. I do want to just make a little bit of an interjection here off the subject. At the caucuses the other night, many people had gone to the Secretary of State's website and went to the wrong caucus, and I had to try and tell them, you're in the wrong caucus. You are in township caucuses. You need to be in city caucuses. Yeah. I think we finally got maybe half of the possible. I think there was 68 people going in the right direction. At the polls yesterday, because I am an election judge. I have been an election judge for most of my son's entire 52 years. Can't remember when I started. I can't tell you how many, Donna, people checked their cell phones and came to us. They were not in the right precinct. These people were new voters. And so I don't think that the websites are giving them the correct information. Is there any alternative to that?
Yes, you can always talk with your party. So if you're affiliated with the Min GOP, you can go to their website. They'll direct you. Of DFL, they also have a website. We have our local units here too. So there are a number of resources that people can use. But yes, and I have just heard this morning that there was a glitch on the Secretary of State's website that led actually people to a partisan website. So there is going to be more discussion about that. And once again, I'm chomping at the bit here to say why I'm running, but I think, this points to some of those things, and we'll talk about that. But how is it that our state government really does help and service our people? And does it really help and service our people? So,
thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad I had my experience yesterday, because now I know a little bit more about the rest of the story of the problem. We'll go on from here. So let's talk about your background a little bit.
Sure. Thank you, Marcy. It really is quite broad and diverse, and sometimes I look back at it and pinch myself to say, is this really what happened, to my life? I grew up in Carleton, just down the road. My dad worked at what was then the Potlatch Corporation. Now it's Sappy, of course. My mom was stay-at-home mom. 7 kids. I was 5 of 7, so I'm a good middle kid. I know how to compromise. I think that's what that teaches you.
Interesting.
But I am a product of the paper industry. That's how my dad supported us, and he did quite well. And we weren't rich by any means, but we certainly were very resourceful. And he was a great provider for us. We had a great big garden. My mom would can, so during the wintertime, how wonderful it would be to have fresh vegetables from the garden that were canned for us. And of course, he fished and hunted off the land. He was self-sufficient, and that is really what he taught us also. Rely on yourself. Don't rely on the government, because you never know what you're going to get when you do that. But then I went on, after I graduated from Carleton High School, to the University of Minnesota. And I got my degree in political science, which I was really, really interested in. I really wanted to know how it was and why it was that people formed governments, how they got together, what were the best systems and ways, and just really had a great 4-year degree there. I'm a first generation graduate, and I did it in 4 years, so I was determined to do that. Of course, when I was exposed to the university, then I was curious about the rest of the world. So I did have an opportunity. I saved a lot of money, worked hard, and had an opportunity to travel around Europe. And that was the late 80s, and or the mid-80s, I'm sorry, mid-80s. And when I was over there, you know, Marcy, I heard over and over again when people knew that I was American, they said, wow, you are so lucky to be an American. And I'll tell you, when I'd come around some of those city streets, whether it was in France or Spain, and you would come upon the embassy or the consulate, and you'd see that pop of red, white, and blue from the American flag, I'll tell you, just grabbed my heart. And I realized then that that was, you know, a moment for me to really take stock of what I had been, you know, afforded in my life. So when I came back from there, I, you know, contemplated what I could do. And I thought, I need to really give back to my nation that gave so much to me. So I took a little time to restock the coffers and get my savings account back up to where it should be. So I worked a little bit, but then I joined the United States Marine Corps. And I was commissioned as second lieutenant in 1987 and served for just over 20 years and rose to the ranks of lieutenant colonel. So each and every time I was promoted, I took an oath to support and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And even though I'm now retired, I was eligible to retire in 2010, I still consider that an oath that I took for life. So that is something I hold dear to me. And once you know, I was eligible to retire, my husband, who I met out in Washington, D.C., he's originally from Arizona, but he was a civil servant that worked for 20 years on Capitol Hill for first a congressman and then a variety of senators and committees. So we had a lot in common, although I will say he's very much of a policy guy. He loves to stay behind the scenes, and I'm very much of a people person, so I like to be in front of the scenes, so we're quite a good match. But we had recently adopted our son. He's adopted from Guatemala, and we decided that it might be a better upbringing for him to move back to my home state of Minnesota. So I convinced him that it was a better deal than Arizona, and I'll tell you, it didn't take much convincing, although when we stepped off the airplane and his nostrils froze together from that cold blast of air, he did have second thoughts, but we did want to move back here so our son could grow up near relatives, grandma and grandpa, and my husband's from a very small family, and so it was important we were back here to be near family and let Ari be able to hunt, fish, recreate, however, you know, he saw fit. And what I tell people is when we moved back here, it didn't take me long to figure out that things weren't quite right, and they certainly weren't how I had left this great state.
So you've seen a change?
I saw a big change.
Okay.
I saw a big change. We were very excited to start my son in the public school system. I was product of the public schools, and I thought, what a great opportunity. They had just built the new Lester Park School, and everybody said it's going to be so great. I'll tell you, that was a year to, well, I don't know if I should say remember or forget, but it was quite a life lesson, and I still am astonished at how people can pack 23 to 32 little 4 and 5-year-olds in a kindergarten class and call it a kindergarten class. So we did not have a good experience there, and our taxes were incredibly high. We had lived out in Maryland where we thought we were under quite a siege of taxes as well, but we quickly found out here we were really struggling between the state tax, the county tax, the property tax, the local tax. It was every time we turned around it was a tax. And so a couple years into it, we decided, we've got to do something. So, as you know, I am a strong Republican, and so we affiliated then with our Republican group here and said, what can we do to get things back to where they should be? We didn't see a very healthy business climate here. We saw, and felt the roads crumbling quite frequently. In fact, where I live off of 40th Street in Lakeside, I don't think that road has ever been touched. They come out every once in a while, throw some hot tar in there, but the potholes are still there.
Yes, and if I may say,
Yes.
I'm finding it more difficult as I live out in the country to come in here without having my car fall into these potholes. We're talking almost every street that you have to travel on is deplorable. I don't ever remember that. As a child, my mother worked at City Hall, and my dad would go pick her up, and we'd have to ride because we weren't left alone at home. And it was not that. It's definitely different. I've lived here all my life, so I have seen some major changes.
You've been able to see it, yeah.
Yes.
And I think of it when, I came back, I just expected very much of the same things that I had grown up with, and I was quite, like I said, shocked at how many taxes were being taken from us and how poor the services were that we received at the local level and the state level. So with that in mind, and of course being a strong patriot, I was very concerned about the direction our country was heading, and got involved with politics and was encouraged to run the first time in 2016 for State Senate, District 7, which is the same seat, and there was candidate Trump on the ballot at the time. So in 2016, you saw really record turnout, and people came out in droves. I still say that Duluth has a lot of hidden voters, and that we need to really encourage people to get out and vote and let them know that their vote does matter. There are a lot of cases, even within our state here, where you can find races that were so close, 12, to 200 votes and that type of thing. So we need people to come out and vote. But 2016 was really an opportunity for me to tell people government isn't the answer in every situation. Really it is your God-given talents that are going to carry you through and answer more of your life questions and help you along your life road. When I did return here, I began working first for the Fond du Lac Reservation. I worked at their clinic here in Duluth, and I had a really great opportunity to understand how the Indian health system works and to understand the different needs within that population group, the higher diabetes rate and that type of thing, the historical trauma. So that was a real eye-opening experience. And then after that, I did use my GI Bill in 2012 to get my Master's of Jurisprudence degree in Children's Law and Policy. And what that opened up my eyes to again was, how is it that our younger generation is being viewed? How is it that we're treating our kids? And once again, that brought me back around to our education. And I said, we have to really start there with our education system.
We certainly do agree on that one.
Yes.
Along with many other things you've said.
Yeah. So I just, really thought, where do we need to start with this? And what I found was that so many of our kids weren't getting adequate education. And here in Duluth in particular, our Native American population, we graduate about 38%.
It is the worst in the state from the statistical information that I've seen.
Yes.
And that is deplorable.
It really is. I think, yes.
You have a special connection there, though, too, don't you?
I do, yes. My mother was born and raised on the Red Lake Reservation. So I'm actually an enrolled member of the Red Lake Nation, one of the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota. And she was born 4 years after the Indian Reorganization Act, which was really prompted by a congressional report called the Miriam Report. And I'm kind of going down in the weeds here, but it does give your viewers an opportunity to look these things up. The Miriam Report went around the nation and looked at the ways that the Indians were situated, how well they were being treated, their education levels, all of that. And the Miriam Report just said it was deplorable.
Yes.
This is really not the way we should be doing this. And if you really read between the lines, what was happening was the government was imposing socialism on many of these tribes. Here's your government handout. Here's what we want you to think, say, and do. You're not going to have an opportunity to defend yourself. We're going to take your weapons away, et cetera, et cetera. So the Miriam report pointed all that out. The Indian Reorganization Act pointed out that we should really let these tribes self-regulate themselves. And what they did was they wanted to pull back on some of the government interference and really have self-governance within the tribe. So that began that route. So I'm really only one generation away from this type of government interference, and really it was meant so that people could figure out what was the best way for their lives. And here I am, kind of jumping around again, but here I am in 2020 looking at another party that is interested in really promoting socialism, which I just think would be disastrous. I know it would be disastrous.
It isn't America.
It isn't America.
It is not America.
Right. And one of the things, going back to being an enrolled member, is that I hear over and over from different members of Indian tribes, is that we've lost our country once. We don't want to lose it again. So we are strong patriots. We're not going to go anywhere. This is our homeland. My mother, of course, has been here for generations and in the Northwest region. And because of those things, I am more tuned to aware of how it is that our education systems are working, our employment systems are, etc. So once I saw that we were graduating our Native American students at 38%, I said, wow, we've really got to do something here. So fast forward now to this time period, and I look back from 2016 to 2020. Have we done anything different? No. And those numbers haven't changed. So I did start working then in 2012 as a guardian ad litem, which, as you know, our Native American children in Minnesota are taken out of their homes at far greater rates than any other population group. In fact, in Minnesota, we have the highest out-of-home placement rate in the nation.
Are you talking through the Health and Human Services in the counties taking these children out of homes that they consider they're being neglected and abused?
That's correct. Yep. So they enter the foster care system at rates higher than the other population. And so, again, working as a guardian ad litem, I would oftentimes meet with the families. I always met with the families, but one of the questions I would oftentimes ask was the parents, did you graduate from high school? Do you need help, with your forms? Do you need assistance? And, anecdotally, a great majority of them dropped out of school. So that was my first indicator. And I'd say, why is it that you didn't stay in? And they said, well, number one, the bullying was so bad. And I'd say, well, didn't you bring it up to a teacher or administrator or somebody? And they'd say it was the teacher that was doing the bullying. So we have a lot of work to do here. We have a lot of work. And I believe in the public school system. I'm just saying I think we have to be creative in getting these numbers out of the dumps, because that's where they are. And everybody deserves a quality education. So as I sat there then as a guardian ad litem and realized it really all comes back to education.
Exactly.
It really does.
It surely does.
So I made another deviation, and I went through a 2-year program at the Fond du Lac College for education. And I completed that and now have my teaching certificate for substitute teaching. Well, it's a Minnesota teaching license. And so now I had worked in the classroom a little bit. I'm not doing it as much, but I am able to see how it is that our bureaucratic system really penalizes our students. And so...
and not just your students.
Right.
My view from monitoring the 709 school district after home educating for 20 years, which why did I home educate was somewhat not exactly the kind of situation, but I was an overly concerned mother. I'm a mama bear, and that's my child, and I am going to make sure he's getting a good education, because the education that our children get is the foundation of their direction for life, whether they can get a decent job to support themselves, whether they stay off of drugs and alcohol because they are depressed because they can't get a job. I mean, the whole thing is surrounding education. Who got out of Vietnam? It was the educated people, the doctors and those professionals got out of education because they could read, they knew what was going on, they saw the political thing coming together, and they got out. Who didn't get out were the poorer people on the farms that were poorly educated. I mean, we look at education, we used to look at education in America.
Yeah.
It's socialism all the way through now, from early age right on up. You can prove me wrong, do some research, but without an education that teaches us to think and reason and be challenged in our ideas that we have, which I did in the school that I went to, Denville, 1965, I graduated. We went out as productive citizens. That's not happening not only to your people, which is worse, but also to all students.
All students, yeah.
And so education, I would think, when you are elected, is going to be a focus.
It'll be a top priority, absolutely, because I think we've got smart people out there who've got smart solutions. For example, we can do a pilot program. Let's do a pilot program in some of these communities and see if the kids in those communities want to go to private school, charter school, independent school. And once again, charter schools are public schools.
We pay for them.
We pay for them.
Yes, we do.
Or public school in have that as a lesson, and then let the state look at that and say, hey, this really would be a great idea. Let's spread this around the state. And again, we can look at capping our school size. I said that in 2016. Let's cap our K through 3, where our kids are learning to read before they read to learn. Okay? You can't manage a energetic group of 18 to 32 sometimes kids in a classroom and give them quality reading time. So we really need to look at different ways. And one of my favorite videos is a TED Talk about looking at our education really through the eyes of the 21st century and not the conveyor belt of 1950, which seems to be at this point, we're really just chunking them through. And I think our 21st century learners need something different. So
is there a website or anything that you might tell the viewers about it so they could go and check that out themselves?
Well, they can Google around. I think there's some really good opportunities to find some different thinking of how we can run our classrooms and just look at innovative approaches, 21st century. I know even right here locally, College of St. Scholastica runs some different models on how we can better educate our students. And that's the thing that amazes me, is that we do have really good research here in America on great education systems, but we don't seem to implement them. They seem to get snatched up by countries overseas that use our great research. So we got to do a better job at that. So education, absolutely. And our out-of-home placement rates, trying to figure out what's going on there. And also, we didn't get a chance to talk about it too much, but our veterans. And one phrase, Marcy, and I think you share this with me, is we shouldn't have the phrase homeless veteran. That just shouldn't exist. And I know other states across the nation have taken that on to try to figure out how we can house and help our veterans who want housing here in our state have that service. So absolutely look at our veterans, see what we can do to help them out and make them feel comfortable and welcome. What type of skills did they have in the military that could translate over to our workforce? And many times they'll come back with training from overseas that won't translate to a Minnesota license. So we really need to look at that. And I know the Air Force accredits many of their training classes, so sometimes it's easier to get those transferred over. But quite frankly, if you're doing a job overseas or in another part of the nation where you put your skills to the test after you've been trained, I can't imagine why those wouldn't transfer over to some of our licensings. So
let's go to jobs, because we have to have a job for those veterans.
Yes.
We have to have something that they, even if they were mechanical skills or whatever, they didn't go to college to get a degree, but they they have manual skills. My father graduated out of 8th grade. That's as far as his education went for various reasons. But he was not afraid to work. And when he worked at the steel plant and they were on strike, he went and found work because he had these manual skills that he could apply to them. Sure. We don't have that in Duluth. We no longer have those lower paying, I'm not sure how to say this, but just manual labor businesses that produce and give these people an opportunity to be employed. And so where do they turn? They have to go on welfare or whatever because they can't afford to move away from here. They're really kind of stuck. Yeah. Do you see that?
I do, yeah, over and over. And in fact, the Center for the American Experiment has a great article and I think website information too on great jobs without a 4-year degree. And you're speaking exactly to that. Where did our trades go in the high schools? And, again, I'm from a similar, situation where my father graduated from Bemidji High School, which if I look back at his schooling, I would say that was almost the equivalent of an associate's degree. He was, very well educated in all sorts of different areas.
What happened?
Yeah, what happened? Where did we go off the rails? I like to say, where did we go off the rails? We need to pull that back up and really help kids get a quality education in areas that they're interested in. And again, the 21st century is a shifting workforce. So jobs, yes, we need jobs here in Duluth, but we also need jobs in Minnesota. And of course, one of the reasons we know that businesses don't come is because
don't stay
is because of taxes. And I know that some businesses that I've been talking with already and saying, hey, I'm running, what's top on your list? Taxes always comes up.
Yes.
People are happy to pay taxes, quote unquote, if they get a good service for it. But when they don't see, good service.
When they have bad roads.
They have bad roads. When there's sidewalks.
They got great bike trails. And they've got great this or that doesn't include everybody's needs, which of course the roads, where are we without roads?
Where are we without roads? Yeah, exactly. So, businesses are starting to take a look at it, and many of them go across the bridge to Superior and find a different environment there and leave the state. And again, I don't want these businesses to leave. I want them to stay here. I want for our college students that are here to graduate and find jobs here.
Right.
Exactly. If they want to stay here, they should be able to stay here. And certainly within the state of Minnesota. But you see that over and over again, our strangling taxes, our strangling regulations. They just become overburdensome. And if you're not, in a business where you have that much time to spend sorting all that out, which most business people that I know don't, they're busy running their business.
Or trying.
Yeah. Then it just really becomes burdensome, and we shouldn't settle for that. We can do a lot better.
I don't disagree because as a business owner, this past winter, we won't get into the details on that, but this past winter has put an enormous financial burden on our business to remove the snow. And you look around at all these places that have these huge big parking lots, and you see that my dollar signs are small in comparison, but with the tax load that we have and that cost of all that snow removal, it's going to be slim pickings this year. There is no doubt about it. I just got one more bill for February plowing, and I'm praying there's no more snow until January of next year. But anyway, so people that are in government making laws to tell us how to run our businesses, tell us how much to pay our employees. They haven't got a clue if they don't own a business. And this city council in Duluth is really, they have one business owner on that city council. So they don't have any idea what it costs to run a business, the expenses that are involved. And then we get the state's exorbitant taxes put on us. And they basically own our business is the bottom line. And we are eking out a little bit of sustenance from them, their ownership. That's socialism in my view of things. It's no different than these countries overseas. We are losing our rights to be different than overseas because we've had too much socialism that has creeped in, and it's in our schools, teaching our children. It's in the media. It's everywhere around us, and most people don't understand that. They think they're free, but I'm looking at it from different angles, and I am basically a slave to the state of Minnesota. Not the city of Duluth, because I don't have my business in the city, and I will not. But all these other entities of taxes, and they just keep going up,
right?
And the services go down.
It reminds me of a phrase that human slavery, the natural evolution, is institutional slavery. So when we can't own slaves anymore, we enslave them in different ways: taxation, controlling their thinking, controlling their decision making. So I know one of the things that really, going back to my mom, that she impressed upon us and that we learned from her experience was that you really can't have a sovereign nation without having first free and sovereign people. And if we want to maintain our sovereign status as a nation, which I certainly do, you have to have free and sovereign people. You can't keep enslaving them in these different ways, whether it's enslavement to taxes or enslavement to a model of thinking. But that really brings up why I'm running again, and I think we're losing that perspective. I think people, if you really understand one thing, it's to understand that socialism is a way of strangling that decision making into the few and the elite. And I think we need to head in the opposite direction. We need to encourage a diversity of thought. We need to have people coming to the table that have different backgrounds from one another, that think differently, that approach the problems differently, that come up with different solutions. And so I really believe that I have those qualifications. And I certainly learned a lot of that in the military, where we would do the red teaming. I talk about that, and I know there's a business initiative for that. But the red team was the team charged with coming in, looking at the plans that you had set about for how you're going to run your operation, and tearing it to shreds. Figuring out where the weak points are, figuring out where it's going to fail, because you'd much rather have it fail at the round table than you would out in the field. So I love that concept of a red team, and that is certainly something that I always try to look at when I'm coming up with solutions. How is it that this is going to affect people? What are the long-term consequences? And where is it going to fail? And that certainly brings to mind the notion now and the effort that I believe some in this current legislation have in the state of Minnesota to legalize marijuana for recreational use. And I know I'm trying to keep my blood pressure down, but one of the first things we need to talk about when you think about that is it's not a federally legal product, so you can't use the banks, you can't use the credit systems to buy and sell the product. So it's a cash-only item. And really what happens is you're going to have cash warehouses, okay? And I can't think of a better way to have money laundering, to have crime.
Oh my goodness.
There's all sorts of ills that go with that. So I think before we even start talking about, okay, what's going to be the real benefits of legalizing recreational marijuana, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of it first.
What are the consequences out there?
Right.
Every time you make a law, if you don't think of the consequences, you get them.
Right, because we have a Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, who had said about Obamacare, let's just pass it, and then we can read what's in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we run up against that kind of thinking. My approach is different. I would think through the consequences as best I can, analyze it, and certainly use the skills that I have within my wheel well to figure out how is this going to really play out. So,
and you and I were at the LEA, Legislative Evaluation Assembly,
Yes.
2 weeks ago, Tuesday, and we get a flyer, which you can go Google lea.org and you will find out all about what they're up to. and it's up to educating you so you know what's going on. And that first paragraph on their 2019 bulletin, it said all. It said everything about how this legislator really voted against the people.
Yeah, yeah.
Omnibus bills with everything in them, which is technically against the law. And then, you know, who did the controlling? 3 people: the governor, the chair of the House, and the chair of the Senate. Why do we send representatives downstate when 3 people get to control how they're going to wrap up the session?
Right.
What's your thoughts on that?
I'll tell you what my thoughts are. Minnesota, you had an opportunity to do it differently because, you know, in 2018, I was the lieutenant governor candidate with Jeff Johnson for governor, and Jeff Johnson absolutely wanted to overthrow the status quo, which is what we see again and again each legislative cycle. And, you know, he was intent on promoting that message that Minnesotans deserve better. You send these legislators down there to legislate and to come up with bills that are going to work for all of Minnesota. And actually, it is against our Constitution to have multi-issue bills in one bill. And so we attempted to do that. We came up, you know, short, so we didn't prevail. But really, that's the message that our legislators need to have: is that stand strong. You know, don't buckle when it comes down to the last minute.
And one, if I can interject one more thing, one freshman senator, it's on my video, so as soon as I get it done, you'll be able to see it. But he said, I will not vote for omnibus bills, which is against the Constitution, which I swore to uphold. So we got one, but we need more than one to stop this train. We need to derail the train and get it on the right track.
That's right. Yeah, it really comes down to those last-minute negotiating, and people say, well, you know, that's just how it's done, or this is the way it's done, and so there needs to be a wrench in the cogs, right, to change things around. And if that's me, I would be happy to do that. And oftentimes people say, well, one person can't, you know, do anything, but I think one person can put a stake in the ground and certainly try to help turn things around. But I'm concerned for Greater Minnesota, particularly our area, because going back to the Senate, what did we see just happen? They just elected a metro area senator to be the minority leader. So Senator Bach, who was the majority leader when the Senate was in control, now is no longer there. So that's really sending a signal that Greater Minnesota, we don't want to talk about your mining. We don't want to talk about the jobs. We don't want to talk about how you care about the environment, because this is my backyard, so I certainly care about it. But I think we can do good mining, good jobs, and have good environment. But I'm not sure that we're going to see that going forward. I think you're going to see a real foisting of the Metro Liberal agenda on all of Minnesota, because that's who we have really running the show down there.
Well, in the Met Council, when I was in township government many years ago, we had a representative from the townships go down for the Met Council meetings and bring back this glorious reason why we have to support it. Well, I didn't believe in it then any more than I do now. Right. But that Met Council has had its tenants out here for many, many years, and I have not been in township government since 2009. So they've been sticking out their tentacles for many, many, many years, and now we see even more.
Yeah, you're going to see that creep, because that is the slant. That's the direction that many people want to head in our current legislature, and I don't think we should head in that direction. Again, we need to reel it back. We need to sort of untangle the government in our lives and let people just really live their lives as how they see fit. And of course, when you combine together in a society, you have certainly areas that you need to have legislation for, but we need to talk about what are those areas where we intersect. Education, of course, is one. Safety is another one. Infrastructure. All right, so bring it back to the basics. And quite frankly, education is a state's right, okay? So I would be happy to tell the government at the federal level, you have no business being in our education system, because there is nothing constitutionally that gives the federal government the right. So that's a state's right, and I think really that's what's going to save us, is having our states be strong and stand up against most of these federal, rules and regulations and thoughts that they're forcing on us. So.
Well, and along with the federal government's, I went to a meeting one time and everybody was saying, yeah. They were all agreeing to everything that was being said from up front. I'm sitting there as an observer. And it was almost like these were puppets sitting alongside of me and in front of me, and there was strings that went up from their hands to the ceiling, and the person up front would pull the string and they'd all put their hands up. It was like,
sure. Yep.
Okay, the federal government, same thing. Well, if you don't do what we tell you to do, we're not going to give you the money.
Right.
And people don't realize the consequences of that government control over them.
Sure.
And many of our governors, and including Palente, who the last election I told him to stay home, he went for the Common Core.
Yeah.
That is destroying our kids' learning abilities. I've got a whole video on that one.
Right.
It is unbelievable how these governors don't stand up to the federal government and say, no, we don't want your dollars. We have this right to control our state. And so we need people like you who are talking about what you're talking about, because most people don't understand really what's going on. And I've been coming a long way, and I'm putting all this stuff together, as you have said earlier. So we only have a few minutes left.
Okay.
And
how did that hour go by so fast?
Well, it's fun talking to a friend. I mean, that's what it's
nice
like, just like
to
talking to a friend. And so we need to kind of condense this real quickly for people as to why they need to be educated before they go to the polls. And should there be more than one in the primary that's coming up in August of this year, 2020, why they need to get educated so they go to make the right choice. Because most people are voting for what the media wants you to hear from these people. And this is alternative media. This is exactly what alternative media is all about. And I'm so thankful for PAC TV and the people that work here, because they give me and they give you a voice alternately.
Yes.
So we want people to watch this. It'll go up on my YouTube channel, Marcia Strumgren, within a few days. And so we want you to get it educated. Now, please sum up for the people. What, again, we've talked over this whole hour, your main points are and why you want them to look into what you have to say so they make a better choice come the fall election and, well, the November election, but primary you've got to go to the primaries. That's where you get to choose your candidate. You need to vote in the primaries.
Right. Well, and as it turns out right now, I am going to seek the Republican endorsement, which should happen hopefully in the month of March here. And currently I'm running unopposed. So there probably won't be a primary unless somebody does challenge me for that, which is, always welcome. It's good to have conversations. And on the DFL side, I think it's similarly situated, where the current incumbent does not have an opponent. So we will not be in the primaries unless that changes.
Okay.
That said, we'll go to the November ballot, and I would really encourage people to understand what's happening on the DFL side. And again, you talk about that puppet and the pulling of the strings. At the national level, there is this great emphasis on turning our nation into a socialist country, and it's not stopping at the national level. It's creeping down into our states. So in Minnesota, actually, the DFL party, I would argue, has lost a lot of their connections to the F and the L. And it's that the Republican Party is really the one that supports our laborers, trades, and our farmers. We're the ones that are looking out for their best interests. So I know here in Duluth, folks vote over and over again because that's how they've done it. But here's another cog in the wheel. Just understand that the party has changed, and that the Republican Party really stands for freedom, liberty, personal choice, an opportunity to exercise your God-given rights. And I don't think the Democratic Party is heading in that direction. So that would be the caution that I would advise people. And you can take an example like Medicare for All. Medicare for All is being pushed here in Minnesota. It's going to be, Medicare foisted upon everybody, whether you want it or not. Well, that means your union health care goes away. That means the Indian Health Services goes away.
Oh my.
Yeah. So
Consequences.
There's a lot of consequences. So this is a real pivotal election, and I would be very honored to be our state Senate senator from District 7.
Well, thank you, Donna. It's been wonderful talking to you and
Thank you.
Getting to know you better. And I really appreciate the fact that you are willing to serve in this capacity. And I thank you for your sacrifice when you were in the military, because you sacrificed many years of your life to help keep our freedoms. As now you're fighting against, more, so to speak, you're fighting against the loss of those freedoms. And so you want to come in at a one more time level of sacrificing more of your time from your family and what you do in life to go out there and represent people. That is a big responsibility. It's basically on the level of being in the military, because you are giving up a good portion of your life, your time, to be the voice. To be the voice that you cannot be in your home or whatever, but you are the people that need to be educated. It's your responsibility to get educated, listen to both sides, and then make your choice based on that. I beg your pardon. Based on that information, not what one media feeds you. You've got a lot out there on the internet. You've got a lot of ways to get the other side of the story, and I really encourage people to go out there and do that. And I just thank you so much that you are willing to run and serve.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank
nice
you.
to see you.
You have a great day now.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.